Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bill Simon. I'm the co-chairman of the William E. Simon Foundation, and I am very pleased to welcome all of you to the presentation of the 2018 William E. Simon Prize for Philanthropic Leadership. I'm joined by three of my sisters, Lee, Amy, and Mary, my brother Pete, and my wife Cindy, as well as the senior staff of our foundation, Jim Pearson, Sarah Faye Snyder, Janice Riddell, and Amy Alred. We are all so honored that our good friend Paul Singer has agreed to accept the Simon Prize. We are also very pleased that some of Paul's nearest and dearest are also here with us today. His partner Terry Castle, his son Andrew and his partner Corey, his brother Larry and Larry's wife Lisa, and Andy Dickerson, who helps run Paul's Philanthropy. I'm also delighted to recognize prior award recipients, Bruce and Susie Kovner, and Roger Hertog. Thank you very much, one and all, for coming. So as you know, we're here today to celebrate Paul Singer's generous and transformative philanthropy, about which you're going to hear a lot more later. Regarding today's program, after lunch, I'll share a little bit about our father, for whom this prize is named, the purpose of the prize, and then we're going to listen to a very energetic conversation, no doubt, between Paul Singer and Roger Hertog. A new aspect of this year's ceremony is that we're going to include 3 brief testimonials from nonprofit leaders about the significant impact of our honorees' giving on their respective organizations. The first message comes from Leonard Leo, the Executive Vice President of the Federalist Society. Now, I mentioned before lunch that we have 3 videos. We saw Leonard Leo, and now our second video comes from Robert Nicholson, the founder and executive director of the Philos Project. The Philos Project is an exciting organization that encourages positive Christian engagement in the Middle East through immersive travel and programs. Attention to the screens. All righty, well, thank you, Robert. You know, Paul, we can see just from these 2 videos that your strategic giving is having a profound and immense impact, and we got one more to go. But first, I want to take a moment to thank the Philanthropy Roundtable for partnering with us for many years on the administration of this prize. Adam Meyerson, you and your team, and Amanda, who is right here to my right, have just been terrific partners, and it's wonderful to see how this roundtable continues to grow in size and influence under your leadership, Adam. Let's give the Philanthropy Roundtable a round of applause. Now I'd like to say a few words about our parents, Bill and Carol Simon. Dad and Mom came from very modest backgrounds in New Jersey. Dad was not always the best student, to put it mildly. And when he met our mom, the legend is that Mom's dad warned her, "Don't go out with Bill Simon. He will never make anything of himself." For those of you that knew Dad, you can imagine his reaction. I think Dad took that as a personal challenge, shall we say. And with hard work and determination, Dad was a big success in the business world, eventually serving as Secretary of the U.S. Treasury under Presidents Nixon and Ford. And it was during that period that it was our ever-patient mother who kept the 7 of us in line, for the most part, and through her loving guidance, helped all of us, and Dad for that matter, to reach our potentials. Dad's accomplishments, many of you know, included being the nation's first energy czar in 1973, and taking the reins as the president of the United States Olympic Committee in the 80s, especially during a very tumultuous period around the Olympic boycott in 1980. He subsequently established the U.S. Olympic Foundation with the profits from the 1984 Games in Los Angeles, the first games that ever turned a profit. Dad also wrote 2 best-selling books that advanced free market ideas and were at the time considered very radical. I have to say that judging from all the wonderful people that are here today, maybe Dad was a little bit ahead of his time, right? He also pioneered the use of leveraged buyouts as a cutting-edge investment strategy. Yet, with all that under his belt, the things that remained most important to Dad were his family, his faith, and the responsibility of being a good steward of the wealth with which he had been blessed. Dad knew that doing philanthropy well would be among the most hardest and most important challenges that he would face. So this award celebrates the philanthropic vision that Dad carried close to his heart. That is, that philanthropy supports American freedoms and this country that we all so dearly love. And it also helps people to help themselves. He used to say a hand up as opposed to a hand out. Now, my family and I know that Dad would be delighted and proud that his name is linked with that of today's prize winner, Paul Singer. Paul founded Elliott Management in 1977 and built it into one of the most successful hedge funds in the entire world. And during that time, he also turned his famous energy and conviction into action and became an extraordinary philanthropic leader, whether it be chairing the Manhattan Institute, architecting the Startup Nation Central, which showcases Israel's entrepreneurial dynamism, among many other things. Paul is a tireless champion of countless causes that were also important to our father. These include free speech on campus that you've already heard about, education reform, constitutional principles, and the rule of law, as well as the defense of Israel. I might add that personally I've known Paul for over 20 years and have worked with him closely on a variety of initiatives. I am proud to call Paul a good friend. And so I could not be more excited that today Paul is joining the ranks of our prior great Simon Prize winners. So now, our third and final video from Jonathan Haidt, author, professor at NYU Stern School of Business, as well as co-founder of Heterodox Academy, an organization that is dedicated to broadening viewpoints on college campuses. And wouldn't that be a good thing? All right, thank you, Jonathan. So now it gives me great pleasure to welcome Paul and Roger Hertog, the co-founder of the investment house Sanford C. Bernstein, himself a legendary investor, a legendary donor, and also a prior winner of the Simon Prize. Roger will lead us in conversation with Paul. Gentlemen, could you please join me on the stage?
Nice to see you. Nice to see you. I need someone to help me up on the chair. It's like a hype chair.
I was going to jump up.
Okay. Good afternoon.
Hi.
So one of the really great pleasures in preparing for a conversation with Paul Singer is that you learn so much about someone's life that you didn't know. Not only have this sort of learning experience have I come to admire him more than ever, I've come to understand why his unique philanthropic vision and accomplishments have made him so worthy of the honor we celebrate today, the William and E. Simon Prize. Thanks for Bill for that wonderful introduction. I just want to add a few points of background. So many of you may know, it's certainly written in the folder, Paul received his BA from the University of Rochester and then earned his JD at Harvard Law. And while his studies in law school never truly captured his imagination, he nevertheless went on to practice law for several years. It was during those years, however, that Paul became keenly interested in managing money. An entrepreneur at heart, he raised a small pool of capital from family and friends, but sadly, early on, lost a lot of it. I don't know how much a lot is, but a lot is probably a lot. This painful experience didn't deter him. It seems nothing does. Paul learned from his mistakes and then came up with a more creative and effective investment strategies, which today have made him one of Wall Street's most consistent investment managers. Now think about this for a moment. You'll see what the word, one of the most successful, means. In the last 40 years, Elliott Management has compounded its investment return for clients at 13.3% a year. 40 years at 13.3. And that's with only 2 losing years in 40. What that means, if someone had given Paul $100,000 in 1977, it would now be worth $18.3 million. It's no surprise then he manages $35 billion. Paul's extraordinary desire to succeed, his ability to change course when he's wrong, and his willingness to take risks are at the very essence of his character. One might say Paul was born with this potential, but he was also fortunate enough to have someone who recognized it and believed in him at an early age. His father, Marty, a pharmacist, wrote this remarkable letter to Paul in 1956, when Paul was just 12 years old. Dear Paul, we must never lose sight of our hopes and the goals that we set for ourselves and become discouraged because some things don't turn out just the way we think they should have.
Dad?
You never know. We must always have hopes and determination that we will better ourselves, that we will learn new things. Those people who look back at the past and brood over it excessively, or dream and weep over the sorrows and mistakes made yesterday, are not completely alive. In many ways, they are dying in our cycle of life. You can make of yourself exactly what you want. You can be happy, you can be sad, you can be a great man. Don't aim low. I have a twofold question. You're not just sitting here gathering dust here. Now it's your time. So, at age 12, did you understand what your father was saying? And what do you think he saw in you that led him to believe you could be a great man? What do you think he thought a great man meant?
I think I did understand, and when you're sitting at summer camp in the middle of the Maine woods, and you get something like that, you read it and you try to come to grips with the larger implications, and it was an expression of not just his specific belief that I had prospects of some kind, but a sign of love, and that I was the apple of his eye for some period of time before my siblings were born. And so rather than Ra- right. But rather than thinking of it in any specific terms, what I came to believe, and he made me believe over and over again, he was just a wonderful man. Whenever I called him, whenever I visited, he always made me feel that nothing in the world could possibly be better, could possibly happen to him that's better than me calling or me visiting. It was very interesting, and by the way, thank you very much for your kind words, and Bill, thank you for your kind words. It was very interesting hearing Bill talk about his dad, because it made me think about the different kinds of launch pads that our parents or the family member that supports us emotionally and gives us some kind of taxiway and some wind under our wings. But Bill's comments made me think that there are a lot of different kinds of motivations. Bill's dad apparently was partially trying to overcome a negative prognostication and prove that he wasn't that, and that he was going to be something in life. My motivation was sort of the opposite, and that is to prove and to fit into and grow into my dad's very, very powerful, strong, positive belief in me, together with later in my life when I was experiencing the adversity that Roger described, trying to get my mom and dad's money back. There was this bear market in 1974, which basically had my managed little family partnership lose close to 90% of the money in it. And so trying to get the money back, I'm not going to say that that was the entire founding impulse of Elliott, but it was certainly a motivating factor.
Okay, one of the threads that runs through your philanthropy is your dedication to the state of Israel and the Jewish people. What is the underlying principle that drives this commitment to Israel? How did it evolve? And please tell us about your largest single financial commitment, Startup Nation Central, which you and your team built from a standing start.
When I was a teenager, I did a lot of reading about Jewish history and World War II and the Holocaust and the origins of Zionism. And my belief in Israel, my desire to support Israel every way I could, to align myself with Israel, arose from a number of motivations: a sense of fairness, a sense of tribalism, a sense of community and family. My family was, I'd call us half secular community tribal Jews. It's our own category. What that meant to me is that as I got older and came to add more layers to the just, basic, we support Israel and I support Israel and they did such bad things to us and never again. What I came to realize, or at least believe strongly, is that Israel for Americans, American Christians, have turned out to be the world's most populous supporters of the state of Israel, and of course, American Jews have long been mostly supporters of the state of Israel. What I came to realize is that Israel, to most Americans, and it still is most Americans, represents a lot of the most powerful and most highly moral sense of who Americans think they are. Independent, determined, strong, democratic, creative, and many Americans, including those who think that America and Americans have lost some of that American know-how and gumption and others of those qualities, still feel that that Israel contains one of the world's, if not the world's, greatest repository of that. And so I felt that, and increasingly in a layered way, and I've been a supporter. I think the way, coming to the second part of your question, I think that the way all philanthropists start is by writing out a check. Just writing out a check to somebody who asks you, or a friend, or somebody who's a development person. And I think my start, aside from my parents giving me 50 cents or $1 to put in the little tin cup, at least on the face of the tin cup, it promised that they would plant trees in Israel. My start was attending the United Jewish Appeal annual Wall Street Division dinner, and sitting there while Ace Greenberg of Bear Stearns embarrassed people into standing up and announcing their gift. And so my start in philanthropy was having the pledge card, which everyone had at the table, and filling it out, and then having somebody stand up and say a number, and I scribbled my number out, and I put a bigger number. So the notion of fundraising and embarrassment as a fundraising tool and peer pressure became known to me. But the path, though, from there leads some, including myself, to expand beyond. It's a matter of predilection, it's a matter of wherewithal. Expand beyond writing out checks to existing organizations when you think that they fulfill the needs, the gaps, or what you think is important to you, you and your fellow man. But beyond it, meaning here's a gap, here's a need, we can't find a group, or there doesn't exist a group or an organization or a person, let's make something up. Let's construct something. In that mode, what you need is a team. What you need is a process and the ability to not only imagine something, but to actually put it into operation on the ground somewhere, and examine it, re-examine it, change vector, correct what needs correcting, trash what needs trashing. And in the case of Startup Nation Central, the conversation internally on my team, my partners, and our staff was, we, meaning Zionist people trying to defend the actions of Israel in a host of different circumstances, we're losing. We're losing. We can't talk about this because what we consider to be the facts and the moral facts, the practical facts, the actual facts, were denied and ignored in the United Nations, in Europe, and places around the world, et cetera. And so what we came to is the realization that a project unrelated to the conflict would be something that we ought to try. And one of my partners, Dan Senor, actually co-wrote the book Startup Nation, and with his brother-in-law, Saul Singer, no relation. And this book was meant to be just a good book, and they hoped to have some kind of a success. It was an astounding success, which has now been translated into 30 languages, and seriously has branded a nation. Now, of course, there's innovation in Israel and entrepreneurship and technology, and of course, it's actually greater as a percentage of the population, GDP, et cetera, than anywhere else in the world. But that book branded the nation, the startup nation. There's more innovation in Silicon Valley. There's lots of innovation around the world in technology and entrepreneurship, but that's startup nation. The second part of the insight was that people, after the publication of the book, delegations from countries and companies around the world would get off the airplane in Tel Aviv and ask the nearest policeman or official, please take me to the startup nation. And of course, the startup nation existed in basements and attics and garages and with scruffy people sitting at cafes with their little computers and in all kinds of places. There was no place. And so the idea behind Startup Nation Central was to create an organization, a place, an ability to fill in gaps. Intel, IBM, Microsoft, and 5 dozen other of the biggest technology firms in the world do not need us to find where to go in Israel to set up relationships, R&D centers, joint ventures, projects, takeovers. But what we discovered in accordance with our theory, our hypothesis, was that there exists so many countries, companies, organizations, NGOs around the world that could use Israeli innovation, digital health, cybersecurity, agri-tech, fintech, but don't know where to go, don't know who to trust, don't know where to go. So we set this thing up. It's unconflicted. My firm does not do venture investing in Israel. We set it up aimed at filling in those gaps and providing services to connect more people to Israel and Israeli innovation, but also to create a database, a real-time or a frequently updated database, which now has 6,000 Israeli companies. And third, generated by the CEO that we hired, who used to be the chair of Israel's Council of Economic Advisors type thing, human capital. Israel is now challenged to meet the human capital side of the demand equation. In other words, the Russian immigration to Israel has slowed to a trickle or stopped. European immigration is very, very small, and there are underserved or under participating populations in Israel. The ultra-Orthodox, men and women, Israeli Arabs, and people around the periphery of Israel, not in the, not coming from the best army units or the best universities.
Thank you. So let me just follow up on part of the question you've answered just now and some of what's on the film, but I think it's actually one of the most interesting pieces of it, of your philanthropy. As I understand it, your approach to philanthropy, which you've said and which was said in the film, begins by identifying a problem, some social, political issue you think is important that you could help resolve. A couple of different scenarios then come into play. Either you become aware of a small not-for-profit that's tackling this problem but requires funding to achieve its aims, or you see the problem, but unfortunately it hasn't been addressed by any not-for-profit. No one's gone to that place. And so you and your team have to build from the ground up and then finance an organization to tackle it. 3 different kinds of organizations that you funded come to mind. The Federal Society, Heterodox Academy, and Philos. And Philos as also as it relates to its associated enterprise passages. I'm interested in, and I'm sure the audience would as well, what is it that you saw when you met with the Federalist Society, heterodox? What was the problem that you identified, and where were they in that stream? Did you have to build them, or did you just have to fund them?
You know, I think being a hedge fund manager, as well as being a lawyer by formal training, both are helpful in the enterprise and relevant to the answer to your question. In the hedge fund world, you have to hold up every problem, issue, potential opportunity. You have to hold it up to the light and rotate it and see it in every form of light and from every angle to try to see if there's an angle that makes sense, that's efficient to create the result. And the result in a hedge fund, of course, is making a rate of return with manageable risk or in a risk-controlled way. In the nature of philanthropy, it's does something exist? What does it address? Does it do so in an efficient way? And I must admit that my initial conversations over several years with Leonard Leo, parenthetically, one of America's greatest patriots and most impactful person in our country, and I every day give thanks for Leonard Leo and Eugene and the Federalist Society and what they're doing for the rule of law in America. But I must say that in initial conversations, I didn't get it. It was very abstract. It wasn't sizzling, and it wasn't something that I grabbed hold of. As I became older or more sophisticated, others would have to be the judge, and I came to realize how important these issues were, and how impactful and fortunate we were as a country to have the Federalist Society, this openly, I'm going to say the S word, subversive, but it's subversive only in the sense that it's such an important countervailing force to the concentration of power, the institutional protection in America for the dispersed power, checks and balances, is to me, that I came to realize, is the essence of the Federalist Society mandate. And to have tens of thousands of members, and to have nothing like it on the other side, and now I don't mean left and right, because there are plenty of people on the left side of the American political equation who believe in the dispersion of power and the rule of law and the Constitution. But the Federalist Society has a unique perspective and a unique role in this as a gathering place, as a teaching tool, as something that galvanizes people to action. And over the years, what I came to realize is that I couldn't improve on it at all. And therefore, the Federalist Society was something and is something that I and my team and my foundation donates to, and also takes the advice of, if I could mangle a sentence, in terms of related projects. Related projects meaning the Supreme Court, the other federal courts, particular court cases that are important. And so the Federalist Society is an example of something where if you can't improve it, help it, and be a part of the core support. Heterodox Academy is something different. Jonathan, who's also a great man, who is doing such important work because he spans the ideological spectrum in the United States. He started something, and we learned of it, and we learned of it in a search for solutions to the problems of the passage of our elite, in particular elite colleges and universities in the United States, into something resembling, cadres of people with Mao Zedong's little red book. Orthodoxy, inability to have rational discourse, and all the things that we all know about. And so these things exercised me and my partners and my team, and we looked around for ways to help with due process, people being accused of this and that, and literally not being allowed, because of college and university rules, allowed to defend themselves. And this viewpoint diversity it's so important. 7 or 8 years ago, when Williams College asked me for, they were in a capital, one of the never-ending capital campaigns. Both my sons went to Williams, loved the place, and I was on the one of the investment committees which was headed by Bill. But they asked me for a large amount of money. They do their homework, whatever. And I spoke to my sons, and basically they said, hey, why don't we get something? And what we got, to make a long story short, is to be able to start a program for the study of American foreign policy, which is now, I believe, in its 7th year, a couple of visiting professorships, seminars, a summer program, a lecture series, gathering people who are open-minded, students that are open-minded. We now have 15 to 20 concentrators in the Stanley Kaplan program. It's exciting because I got advice from people in this room, Jim Pearson, Bill Simon, Robbie George, and being able to construct programs like that is very satisfying. When we approached Jonathan and inquired about his program and discerned the possibility of scaling, making it bigger, making it more comprehensive, I think we were very helpful to Jonathan. We pitched the ideas of viewpoint diversity to our friends, because gathering other philanthropists, donors, activists around you for enterprises that you believe in has several really important and positive effects. First of all, it creates tribes that feel not isolated, but together and allied with like-minded people. It's good to feel that there are like-minded people that you can talk about, that you can talk to about a problem, that you can enlist to help you or to help the problem or to help them. And so it's not just a question of needing bucks when people like us and our other, our friends who are doing similar things, enlist their friends in enterprises. And that's one of the ways that we approached things like the Heterodox Academy, which has been a really, really exciting project. This conference that we hosted in New York a few months ago, we were worried. Viewpoint diversity in a full day, maybe it was 2 days, I don't remember, I think it was a day. Would 20 people come? Would 30 people come? I mean, this was an experiment, and that's another part of entrepreneurial philanthropy. My team worked their butts off, and it was a fantastic success. The speakers that we got were first quality. I think the attendees were 350 people. It was a magnificent program. And so the collaboration, the taking seeds or taking nothing and making something, taking seeds and helping them to make it bigger. Our foundation and myself do not need to be, controlling, things like Heterodox Academy. Jonathan wouldn't allow it. We don't want it. We want the impact. We want the feeling. The feeling is gratifying enough, and the feeling is there's this problem. It's unfair. It's wrong. It takes the academy in the wrong direction. And at the end of this startup process, we feel we've taken this ship and the rudder has actually turned a few degrees and it's turning in the correct direction. And so that's an exciting part. And that's why, for me, it's worth going into this kind of detail for these kinds of projects, because in the room are people who are already doing wonderful things with their own creativity, or others who could.
Quickly, Philos and Passages. What were they? Were they started from scratch? Where'd they come from?
Absolutely from scratch. And as Robert described, the Philos project came out of the team sitting down and saying, gee, it is true that American evangelical Christians, together with the Israeli actual defense forces, that American evangelical Christians are the reason Israel, you may think this is an overstatement, but we think, basically has survived. With that support from 85 million American Christians, most of whom are in favor of Israel, support Israel, some of whom really enthusiastically support Israel. But the inside of my team was not that. It was, gee, do American Jews give those people sufficient friendship, respect, connection? There are existing groups that bring together American Christians and Jews in the service of supporting Israel. But the Philos Project started with the correct notion that those efforts could use beefing up, could use modernization, could use connecting with each other, that activism is something that was not fully developed in those networks, and the Philos Project, led by Robert, was designed to overcome those not failures, but lacks and gaps, and add value in this area. From that came the idea of a Christian birthright trip kind of thing, which we call Passages. And the notion there was to have young Christian leaders go to Israel on carefully curated trips, pro-Israel young Christian leaders, go to Israel, see and connect with the faith part of what Israel has to offer, faith being something that's under pressure here in the United States, to connect with the Judeo-Christian ethic and moral codes, and to see modern Israel. And this year, that program started 3 years ago. This year, we're sending 3,000 kids to Israel, and this program is scaling. It's an utterly fantastic program, and of the things that we have that we've done that we're proudest of, we meaning my partners, my team, my foundation. I think this is the one that we're proudest of in the sense of the many reasons to be proud. It's scalable, it's successful, it's almost 100% useful in taking people who are pro-Israel, and they come back and they are floating above the ground. They are just so passionate, and so many of them say that their lives are transformed by the experience. They turn into Israel's biggest supporters on campuses, and some of them turn into the biggest and most active and effective combaters of the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement against Israel. I know that in this discussion, we've been talking a lot about Zionism, Israel, and our Jewish philanthropy, but I think the relevance is the part where we create things that didn't exist before, fund them, back them, and gather resources from our friends, acquaintances, and people who we think are like-minded, but they just didn't hear of it yet. That's very exciting to me.
Well, we're getting down to the hour. I have a little sign here that says time is up. That usually means it's over. But considering, Paul, you know, we started with this wonderful letter from 1956 from your dad, Marty, and I think he would be very proud of you, what you've done.
Thank you, Reverend.
And what you've achieved, and you have become, I think, in his eyes, God willing, a great man. So, ladies and gentlemen, you can see why Paul Singer